which is really kind of the way I started to garden all those years ago. And, you know, when I rented places, I gardened in pots until I finally owned, you know, something where I could garden in the ground. But for some reason, I have always felt like with gardening in pots, I'm 90% in charge, and gardening in the ground, I'm about 10% in charge. Like Mother Nature is more in charge in the ground. I don't know why, you know.
I feel like you need to be in charge.
Well, I need to control how my plants look and how pretty they are. Whereas in the ground, you know, you got the moles, the armadillos, the deer, the this, the that, you know, just the millions of things that. So I don't know. That's how I feel about flower gardening, which is why I really like it. Because yes, I do like to be in control. You didn't know that? Wow. So anyway, so first let's talk about pots. There are no perfect pots. All the pots that you want to use outside need to have drainage holes. So if they don't exist, like everybody's been using, you know, metal troughs and, you know, different things. So you have to create your drainage holes if it doesn't come with it. But there is no perfect pot in the sense that, you know, clay pots can freeze, ceramic pots can freeze, fiber pots can blow over easily because they're lightweight. Plastic holds more moisture, so sometimes your plants get too wet if they're in plastic, depending on what they are. Clay dries out really fast, so you have to water more often. So, you know, you just kind of have to work out what works best for you. If you're an overwaterer, you know, you probably want to stay away from glazed or plastic. And if you're an underwaterer, that might be just the thing to help you, you know, keep things moist. So, if you buy, yeah, like we're really into the glazed pots, obviously. I like those. And the Vietnamese glazed pots are the sturdiest as far as being frost resistant. And they don't ever say frost proof. They really always say frost resistant. But they're kind of thick and they're fired at a higher temperature, I think. So they kind of hold up a lot better. So one of the things about pot gardening, for me, I always think bigger is better in the sense that the more soil you have, the less often you're going to have to water on the whole. So I love reading gardening magazines. In England, they always had the little geraniums, you know, in the little tiny clay pots on the windowsill, you know, kind of thing. And that's just, so charming. But, you know, I just never was any good with little tiny clay pots or little tiny anything because, you know, you blink, you go to work and you come home and they're dead. You know, I mean, it's just we live in that kind of a climate. And I don't know about y'all, but if you have time and you're willing to water every day, that's great. But I have to water at work every day. So I really want my pots to be like an every other day or every third day kind of moment a lot, you know. So that is what I work towards personally when I'm flower gardening. So the size of my container. So usually I will do like anywhere from a 16-inch to a 20-inch or something like that. Just fairly decent size with height so I can get some nice amount of soil in there. Okay, so then that's another thing, soil. Everybody's got their own loves and dislikes on soil because there's a lot of different types of soil. And again, some soils, why don't you? Oh, I have soil right here. Oh, all right, we have all the soils, good. Thank you. Yeah, so our favorite that we have is this Fox Farm. Unfortunately, with the COVID thing, there's a shortage of this particular, all we've been able to get it in is the little bags. So we got,
I love that little handle.
I know. We got the, this week we just got this one, which contains a soil wetting agent in it. So if you are err on the not watering enough side, that could be a good one for you because it's going to be able to hold some moisture in there.
What's the agent here?
Core. And then this is another potting soil that we've been able to get in the big bags. So we got it, which seems a little bit lighter weight than these two. So I'm not sure because I haven't used this yet. But
So why do you like the Fox Farm best?
what I like in a soil for outside is, like I used to love the ladybug soil. I like a moderately heavy, dense soil. Not, I shouldn't say it that way, I guess, but something with some substance
Right.
that drains really well
Right.
and that holds moisture pretty well. So, like, I don't like Miracle Grow soil. It's light, it's fluffy, it dries out too fast, in my opinion. That's just me,
Well, okay.
you know.
If this gets dry, is it easily rehydrated?
Yes.
Okay, because that's always been my complaint is that once something gets totally dry, it's impossible to get it moist.
Those are peat-based soils. Is that what? That's not peat-based, is it? This.
That, I believe it is.
It is. Okay.
But it has compost.
But it
too.
has compost in it. Yeah. If you get like, used to be soils were mostly like peat and perlite and vermiculite, and that peat when it got dry, you just couldn't hardly wet it. You know. So.
You have to massage it.
Yeah, right, and let it sit in water and like suck it up and stuff. Yeah, so a lot of the old timey soils were like that, I think, and but these that are mixed with other things seem to not do that at all. So so that's kind of what I'm looking for. But it's funny, I'm kind of a heavy-handed water when I water, but in my older age, I ignore watering more often. You know, I just don't pay attention as much. So I kind of like something that, yeah, holds a little moisture in it now. It's interesting how that changes. So that will predict kind of what kind of soils you kind of like to use. So it's not a set in stone thing is what I'm trying to say on soil.
Talk about having your soil moist when you...
Yes, and when you pot, it's really a good idea to not use soil out of the bag if it's completely dry, because that's another thing. You cannot then water your soil and expect it to get moist. So you want your soil to feel like, here, which bag shall I use in my, do you know what's in here now?
I don't.
Don't know what you used yesterday?
Probably commercial soil.
Oh. All right, well, let's try this one because I haven't used this yet. So I want to see. Sorry.
Not a good side.
Hi. Okay, so you really want your soil to kind of hang together a little bit when you pull it out of the bag, and if it doesn't, I mean, you don't want it wringing wet, but you don't want it to just completely fall apart because that's too dry. So wet it a little bit. You know, don't make it soggy, but wet it just enough so that it kind of does that when you pull it out of the bag. And that way, when you water your pots in, when you've got them finished, they'll take the right amount of moisture in after that. And it's always important when you finish potting to go ahead and give your plants a thorough drink of water right then and let them settle into their new soil. Because you know how soil moves and it's not packed around them quite right to begin with. So. Okay, so a lot of these soils come with some fertilizer in them, which will help get everything started really well. But that is the one thing about containers in Texas, is that we have to water a lot, so we leach the nutrients out of the soil quickly. So that is the one thing that I think a lot of people don't do enough, is fertilize enough. And you can't just use a liquid fertilizer. Now I say that, we do it in our little tiny pots, you know, on the shelf.
But we do it twice a week.
But we do it twice a week. And in real life, you're not really going to keep up with that. So about once a month, once every 6 weeks. You can go by the color of the plants. If they don't look particularly green, you know they're hungry. But try to get on a regular schedule of some kind of fertilization, because you will leach all that nutrition right out of there pretty quickly. So our favorite things to use are the same things that we use in flower beds, those granular organic fertilizers that you can just sprinkle on top of the soil, because it's just easy to, you know, dust a little on there and then water like normal with your water hose or whatever. Earthworm castings has no fragrance. So if you have pots up close to your patio that you don't want to smell manure, earthworm castings is a great choice for fertilizing. But if you don't care, like the plant tone or the other fertilizers in there can work just fine. But that's just an easy way. And if you love to miracle grow, do it. Just know that you can't just do that by itself alone the whole summer, or your plants will get really hungry looking. You just need to supplement once in a while with some granular fertilizer.
I've been supplementing a lot lately with the Super Thrive.
Super Thrive, yeah.
And it is unbelievable, the color and how happy things
Everything
look
is.
for using it.
Super Thrive is like B vitamin.
Yeah,
It
it's
smells
all
just
the
like B vitamin. Have you ever smelled it?
minerals and vitamins.
It's great too for as a root stimulator. If you have something that you're transplanting or you're trying to make root, it works really good for that too. It's a really interesting product. Yeah. Okay, so drainage in your pots, some kind of good soil, nothing. Don't dig dirt out of the yard. Don't let me hear you dig dirt out of the yard. And
That's not dirt, it's sand.
and some nice fertilizer on a regular basis is great.
What about decomposing leaves to mix in leaf mold?
I would say compost is one thing because it's already decomposed, but decomposing leaves is going to take nitrogen from your soil.
Okay.
So I don't think I'd do that. Yeah. Now some people like to mulch the top of their pots to keep the soil the soil cooler and the water in. It confuses me as far as the watering goes. I can't tell unless I look at the soil. I look at the plants too, for sure, but I also look at the color of the soil. I get to know my soil. So that, I can't, I don't know why. I can do it in the ground, but I can't do it in pots, mulch in pots, but personal preference there on that. And another thing that I think is really important with containers is that you look at them regularly. I think that's where people fall down. You pot it on Sunday, and then the next Friday when you get off of work, you go out there and you go, oh no, it's half dead already. And I don't know about you, but I've hauled plenty of things home that were like that, where I stuck them in their little pots over in the corner and then came upon them and they had dried out and died. I've done that a million times. So it's really important to look at them, make it a practice of, drinking your glass of wine at night or whatever as you stroll and look at your pots and get a sense of what's going on all the time. That way you'll head off drama and keep everything looking good, Okay, so then plant selection obviously is the fun part. And the main thing is to, of course, in the old days, everybody just put a plant in a pot and called it, exciting. Well, now we're just way beyond that. We can't just put one plant in a pot. We have to put several plants in a pot to call it exciting. A whole garden in a pot is what we're going for most of the time now. So that makes it harder, because if you put one plant in a pot, you're only having to keep up with the needs of the one plant. If you're putting 3 different plants in a pot, then all of a sudden you better make sure that those 3 plants like the same thing, like the same amount of sun, like the same amount of moisture, and that one doesn't grow really exuberantly huge and just drown out the rest of them. So you got more to think about when you're dealing with mixed plantings. But that's what looks so cute. So anyway, I'm going to start talking about plants here. All right, this is my shade planter right here. And should I just pot as I go?
Sure.
Should have gotten some gloves. And a scoop, but hey, I'll have a pot in a minute. All right, so this is Terenia, which comes in different colors. This is, we have a yellow, or we did have a yellow up there, and it comes in a blue, and it trails. So, the old jingle, the
Thriller,
the
Filler.
filler, the spiller. Somebody invented that a number of years ago. Well, it kind of makes sense. You've got your height and your filler and that. Now, obviously, in these little pots, I'm not putting the right I don't want to say the right quantity of plants, but if I had a big pot, I would be repeating what I did. You know, I might put something big and then another plant, a few of those, and then a few of the third plant around to make it symmetrical. You know, I think 3 things is really usually the limit on what you should use in a pot. We get mixed pots in from plant farms sometimes, and they, I think, just use up whatever leftover junk they have, you know, and they'll have 10 different kinds of things in one pot, and it's just, you can't even hardly look at it because you just go, what am I looking at? You know, it's just kind of crazy. So, you know, if you simplify, I think it looks better. Okay, and then this is an airplane plant, a begonia and a shrimp plant. So in these pots, you know, we kind of have to do it a little different because this to me is too small to maintain for any long period of time. If I bought one of these, I'd take it home and transplant it into something bigger because you'll have to water it too often in no time. So what I go for is always some kind of foliage item in a pot. I like to, I guess, calm down the flower part of it with some foliage. But all of these things will grow in a shady pot, and you know how hard it is to find things that like the shade. How many of you have shade?
All shade.
Yeah. And that little sweet begonia. And that. So I don't disturb roots when I pot. I think Mary probably breaks things up when she pots.
I do.
I just plant as is. Unless I have to cut the roots off the bottom of the pot or something if I can't get it out of the pot. But all right, now I will say that it is really important to leave a water well, and by that it means a space below the rim that when you water, the water fills up in that pot and then it drains. That way you are not splashing all the dirt over the sides of the pot. And it allows you to water enough to get that soil wet. If it's potted right up to the top, you can't add much water to that plant, so it's really hard to wet the plant. And I've seen people plant where they mound it totally up, and I don't know how you keep that stuff moist because it makes it really hard. So always a 1/2 inch to 1 inch, depending on your size of the pot, for a water well.
And make sure you get soil in between your plants. I notice a lot of people don't do that.
Like right now, I'm gonna tuck that soil here. I'm gonna feel in there and make sure that everything is covered up with the soil. And I'm pressing down just a little bit around and pressing those plants in just a little bit and making sure it comes behind everything. Okay. So that is one shade pot. All right. Here's my neutral pot. Now I am the queen of neutral. I am. I like green, and I like monochromatic color schemes really well. But these are some of my favorite things. This is that euphorbia that is just sweet. It's just great filler. This is silver dichondra, which is a trailer, which does really well when it's hot.
Also called ponyfoot.
Ponyfoot, and penta, which attracts butterflies. So that's, you know, kind of my main flower here. So you can see, because these pots are little, I'm just using 4 different things in them just to, and this is a juncus grass called blue arrow. And I just like the spiky look of the plant to give me some height. So I filled the pot, I say that loosely. The pot was filled for me halfway up. But yes, I would fill the pot halfway up with soil and then just move what I need to get that plant stuffed in there. And one of the things about planting pots is that in all actuality, you know how you do in the ground and you do your normal spacing, like your shrubs, you put like 3 or 4 feet apart, and you know, you space everything the way it's going to grow. Well, in a pot, you don't follow any of those rules. You just cram it as close as you want it and get it as full as you want it. And I'm a believer in fairly full because I do not want my pot to be beautiful the last day of its life before the big freeze. You know what I mean? I don't want to wait that long. So, yeah. So I want it to get pretty before that so I can enjoy it all summer. And
Is that all sun?
this is a sun pot, yes. So to me, that is soothing and pleasing. So I love that color scheme personally.
Okay, say goodbye to your YouTube viewers.
Bye, everybody.